system is actually tied to the hardware with encryption. And, through all kinds of laws, you can't actually change that or alter it. So now you're totally not in charge. Now, if a company wants to do this, if they're happy with that, then, you're welcome to it. But, of course, for a government, this is simply not acceptable. So what we think, and one of the things I do in my sort of day job is to help companies and other organizations achieve these kinds of IT architectures, is there are basically two kinds of software. It's the generic stuff that everybody has, like a word processor or a web server, the stuff that is independent on what it is that you do. Most of that is available open source today, or will be very soon. Then there's the other stuff, the applications that make your organization special compared to all the other ones. That is the stuff you want to control yourself, because that is what separates you from everybody else. If you want to be an innovative organization, whether commercial or not, you don't control that kind of things, then how can you be different from the next organization? So in the discussion we found that it is very useful to separate open source and open standards, although they are related, because of course often in markets where there is no open source, open standards are going to get sort of broken by companies who have an interest in that. But as talking points you can split them. And open standards is now a very broadly accepted thing. Open source is still more difficult. Of course, you can talk about open source. This is the generally most known term, certainly about non-technical people. Of course, the principles of free software, that it's not about the technical issue of access to the source. It's about the principles of the freedom to do with it what you want. So whenever I get the opportunity, I try to explain the difference and how they come together. So since September of 2007, we've had a national Dutch IT policy around open standards and open source. And it's a little booklet. You can download it from the Ministry of Economic Affairs, both in English and in Dutch. And these are the main goals. We want interoperability. We want computer systems to be able to share data. We do not want to be dependent on software vendors as a government. And we need to improve the functioning of the local IT market, so that if the government spends public money on IT, we would like them to spend it on Dutch IT companies. This is, a logical thing, because we're talking about serious amounts of money. Now, these are some of the concrete things. Open document format is now mandatory for all government organizations. So if you live in the Netherlands and you want to send a letter of complaint to your local government, you can do it in open document format, and they are obliged to be able to read it and respond to it. So if you protest the local tax through a document in ODF and they don't respond within 30 days, then your protest is valid. So, please do, because that, at the very minimum, it gets you some money. I mean, I can't make it easier than that. Now, there are several pilots going on, and there is a budget for education and promotion about the concepts towards government. Now, this is a small project, so they have a few million euros per year to spend on basically educating the rest of the government and the public sector. And just to explain how small their budget is, the government's budget for software per day is about as big as what this organization gets per year. So we spend several million euros per day on buying new proprietary software, and we spend that amount of money per year on educating people to not buy that software. So we still need to do something. The Dutch Antitrust Authority has been asked several times, in fact, to investigate the functioning of the market. They have stated on several occasions that they don't see a problem with the functioning of the market. And that is extra interesting, since they also stated that they don't see themselves technically capable of switching to another desktop operating system. So those two things are a bit weird, but they themselves apparently don't see this weirdness. Now, a lot of nonsense has also been told by people about what the plan is and what it isn't. So 3 points that it's definitely not. It does not make open source mandatory, although personally I would like it for some areas. I'll get to that later. But it does not right now. It doesn't forbid specific products. So if a local government wants to continue to buy Microsoft Office to do word processing, then fine. It's just when you save the document, it needs to be in open document format, which you can do, by the way, with Microsoft Office now, so it's no problem. If you can explain to the local taxpayers that you need to spend 500 euros a seat on a word processor when there is a free alternative, hey, it's your local government, it's your money, go ahead. And no specific standards are forbidden. So you need to store your documents in open document format, but if you're a local government and you want to also store them on Betamax tape, hey, go ahead, it's fine, it's your life. Now, even organizations like NATO are now adopting ODF, so it's really, really mainstream. It's basically everybody's doing it. This is not, the most progressive organization on the planet, also not when it comes to IT, and even they are now adopting ODF as an official document standard. So we've really sort of arrived. Now, of course, there are lots of fake grassroots organizations who are fighting this. They say, no, it's very important for governments to have choice. And what they mean, they need to have the choice to buy our software. So organizations like these will spread incredible amounts of disinformation, basically, about what the policy is, what its aims are, and why it's bad, and things like that. And of course, one of the things they've been saying for years, there are lots of legal risks about open source, because you don't know who programmed it, and the project might get sued over patents, and so don't do open source because there are all kinds of untold legal risks, which is really funny right now, because Microsoft has just been sued in a Texas court through a patent company, and apparently they can't sell Word anymore. Now, I think they'll just buy a bunch of judges and this will all go away. But it does goes to show that legal risks are not, just for open source. It's basically all software has legal risks, particularly if the legal system has gone totally insane, which apparently it has in the US. But in Europe, open source is on the march. Pretty much all countries are doing it in some form or another. Germany and France are ahead in practical implementation. Spain is doing really cool stuff. The Netherlands was the first country to have a formal policy, but in terms of practical implementations, we are still lagging. And we're hoping to correct that. Now, I wanted to get back to the national sovereignty bit for a bit. Because now that we have a practical policy, and so I consider sort of the first phase of my personal goal, to be accomplished, and now we need to implement it, and this is, lots of work and lots of meetings, and the good thing about it is that you can actually get hired to do it by the government and get paid to do it, but it's not, of course, as sexy as the initial sort of battle. So I'd like to take it to the next level, and I want to try out some ideas. I want to take you back to these guys. In the 16th century, the Netherlands declared itself independent, and then we fought the Spanish for 80 years. And at some point we won, or probably they just left because of the bad weather, but it's one of those. But anyway, then, so in 1648 we became our own nation, and have been ever since. And, all of Europe became nation states. So these are areas of land where a bunch of people got together. We said, okay, we share a language and a culture. We're going to elect a government that is going to, run our society for us. And if we don't like them, we elect another one. And then we're going to make some rules how we live together. So this is what is known as the nation state. It's an interesting concept. And it is ruled through laws. But nowadays, of course, those laws become reality in software. If you have a state pension, the transfer of money from the state to your bank account is done in software. If the state does things like tapping phones for reasons of national security, it does so through software and many other things. Without software, modern society would simply collapse, and very rapidly. So then the question becomes, well, who controls that software? Because if the software is so vital for the day-to-day functioning of society, and government doesn't have a sort of ultimate control over it, then do we still have a government, or is it really sort of a corporate republic instead of a democratic country? So I would pose that governments should have control over all critical IT functions.